My name is Maya Rivers. I graduated from Eastern in 2012. While I was here, I studied art history. Most recently, I was the Assistant Director of Education and Public Engagement at the Center for the Study of Slavery and Justice at Brown, and I am now the Assistant Director of Student Affairs at the School of Museum of Fine Arts at Tufts University. So when I started at Eastern, I was actually a double major. I came in as both history and visual arts, and it wasn't until the second semester, I want to say, of my freshman year, I took a class with Professor Samantha Pickney, who taught art history, and that was like very much like an aha moment where I realized oh, people can study art, and it felt like a discipline that beautifully married my love for art, but also my love for history as well. So after that one class, I took their second class. So it was like the art history 2. And then after I took that class, I took the opportunity to study abroad. And so my junior year, I studied in Florence, Italy for a semester. And it was a beautiful experience to see a lot of the works that I was learning about at Eastern in person. But I think one thing that came up for me was representation. I didn't see myself, I didn't see Black artists while I was in Italy. And so I think that was something that stuck with me when I came back. And so after I graduated, I kind of fell back into youth work and community organizing, which was something I did when I was in high school. But while I was doing that work, I found a way to, again, pull from my art history background and do public programming with young people that really create an opportunity for students to think about both their identity by using the arts. So over the years, I've been able to create some really cool programs that really incorporate the arts, but allow students to think about themselves and their place in the world and belonging through various forms of the arts, whether that's music, paintings, drawings, visiting different exhibitions. So I guess that would kind of explain my trajectory. And so after a couple of years of doing youth organizing, I decided to go back to school, and I was torn whether or not I wanted to go a traditional route and do art history. But then I met with a college counselor that I had when I was in high school, and they recommended public humanities, which was a program that was at Brown through American Studies. And the best way I can describe public humanities is, how do you take what is happening in academia and make it accessible to the public? And so again, this was another opportunity to think about questions of race, identity, and belonging, but through the arts. And so I've been able to do really cool programs with high school students. I feel like that's my sweet spot. Love working with high schoolers. Organizing trips to the Rhode Island School of Design Museum, or developing a curriculum on the civil rights movement and taking students on a trip throughout the South and visiting different museums and centers that kind of tell this history within the museum space. So that's kind of been my work for I would say the last 10 years, because that's how long it's been since I graduated. And now I think I'm in a very different role where, as the Assistant Director of Student Affairs, I'm really thinking about the student experience from their first year up into their senior year. In terms of kind of work that I did at the Center for the Study of Slavery and Justice, I would say one of the biggest programs was the Slavery and Legacy Walking Tour, and it kind of grew out of this need for a lot of educators in Providence, Rhode Island, who now had to teach the history of slavery to students as young as 5th grade, and weren't feeling entirely confident about how to do that in a way that was palatable, that was age appropriate. And so I developed this walking tour throughout campus where students can learn about the history and legacies of slavery, and how both Rhode Island and the university itself benefited from the transatlantic slave trade. And so this also incorporated different exhibitions that were on campus. There is one that our center curated or that the CSSJ curated, that is permanently housed in University Hall, which is the oldest building on campus. And through the archive, we know was built using both enslaved and indigenous labor. And of course, students always came to the CSSJ who had rotating exhibitions. The exhibitions would change about 4 times a year. Another really cool program, I would say, was the Civil Rights Movement Initiative. So it was an opportunity to partner with my alma mater at Hope High, which was the high school that I attended, which is just up the road from Brown University. It's the only public institution on that side of town. Every other high school, middle school is private. And so students were invited to Brown's campus for series of seminars that would prepare them ultimately for a week-long trip throughout the South, where we would visit 11 cities in 6 states over the course of a week. And so we would visit institutions like the Center for Civil and Human Rights in Atlanta, the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis. Throughout that week, they got to meet a lot of veterans and foot soldiers of the movement and hear first-hand stories of their engagement in the civil rights movement. And then students would come back and give a presentation. And throughout the trip, we would always try to fold in one kind of art activity for students. And so one of the stops on the trip was the Bryant grocery store, or I will say what's left of that store. A lot of it has fallen apart over the years. And so students would create these signs that then we would put on stakes and put into the ground in front of the Bryant grocery store, kind of as a memorial to Emmett Till. And have pictures of that. And it was something that students were really proud of. I would say another big program at the CSSJ, I would say not community-based, but more, I think, for my own growth and development, was serving on the curatorial team. So before I joined the CSSJ, first as a graduate fellow, that's where I did my fellowship for 2 years, I was not privy to curation, what it was, and it was a beautiful experience to kind of, I remember my first exhibition was a bunch of slides that the art department was getting rid of, but it had depictions of slavery, and the professor emailed us and said, hey, you guys might want to do something with these images. And that exhibition was called A Peculiar Aesthetic, and it was thinking about how slavery is depicted through art, often idyllic, not the harsh reality that we know racial slavery to be. And so being able to use both these images that were going to be discarded, but also doing research and archival research at that to put together this show was kind of my first experience in the world of curation. And over the years, being able to curate many exhibitions, even some with high schoolers, I think revealed kind of like the flexibility of the arts, right? Because again, starting in 2012, you study art history and you think, okay, I have to be an art historian and that means I have to be a professor. But realizing like art is more flexible in terms of like careers and what you can do with that. Particularly in my field, the position that I was at in the CSSJ, a lot of that work was working with the community and wasn't solely geared towards just art. A lot of that was research heavy, community engagement heavy. And so when this position opened up at the School Museum of Fine Arts at Tufts, it was an opportunity for me to return back to the arts. And so now again, getting to work closely with art students as well as professors who are also practicing artists seemed like a unique opportunity that fell out of the sky. And so, I applied and here I am. And I think, again, it's another reminder, like I can, again, pull my arts, even though I'm not a practicing artist and I am not teaching art history. I think it's just a great experience to be in that world and be so close to so many big institutions within Boston or within the art scene of Boston, because as you know, Rhode Island's really small and we only have one art school in Providence. So kind of was the impetus for me leaving. In terms of my next career, it's not fully realized just yet, but I know that it's not here in the US. And so I am a person that has had the privilege to travel quite a bit, both in Europe, the continent of Africa and South America. And I definitely think that my next step is out of the country, because I think in my experience in traveling, I've been able to, I always make an effort to go to museums, particularly art museums, and see what, other artists are thinking about outside of the US context. But there is always something that connects. And so as of now, I see myself in Brazil, which has a very vibrant art scene. Not sure what that's going to look like just yet. But I definitely think that, again, I would prioritize working with the community through the arts. I feel like if you're studying art, you're not doing it because you want to make a ton of money. I think you're doing it because you have a passion for art, you have a love for art. And so I would say to any student who is studying art to be open to the many paths, the many directions that art can take you in. And it may not be what you thought at first or as straightforward, but for lack of a better expression, trust the process. Just think of it kind of like a canvas. It starts off white, and it becomes something very beautiful. So I would say be open and be flexible.